Ray, I love this idea of agile governance, but I think, a lot of people would say that sounds like a paradox, right? And I think you just gave some granular characteristics, but if you were to describe in your mind, what would be 3 or 4 major characteristics of agile data governance, what would they look like?
Yeah, so it's all about taking it from a use case perspective. Instead of saying, hey, we need to master all of the data across the enterprise, which obviously is the end goal. It's about taking incremental steps and looking at use cases or looking at use areas of the data and doing the governance process on them. And now when we're talking about Agile, we're not talking about 2 to 4 week sprints, right? But we're talking about something that behaves more agile, that we're looking at very accomplishable steps, very repeatable steps to generate mastered data that falls in the governance of the organization. So the way we've implemented it in the past is that we start with use cases, we generate what we think the governance should be around that information, how it should be curated, how it should be stewarded, and then we take a subset of the data that we know we have in that domain, we go, we master it, we do everything that we need to, and then we circle back iteratively and understand the lessons learned from building out that curated now set of data and information that can be leveraged across the enterprise. And we take those lessons learned and put them back into this design thinking and agile process to really iterate and do this rapidly so that you're not trying to take on the millions or billions of complex environment.
So I really like this idea a lot. I want to sort of replay this with 2 thoughts. So when I help people with data strategy work, I have a point of view that I'm not going to do strategy work for more than a few months because it basically it's not going to end up being meaningful. I have to get into doing some real life project work, and that informs what we're doing. And then I think that what I really like about this idea of agile governance is it's almost like the same, quote unquote, the requirements. So we're absolving ourselves of the illusion or delusion that we can actually figure out a priori everything that we need to do. We figure out enough to get going. We motivate it with some real life work, and then we iterate from that. That over time, done correctly with the right kind of leadership and oversight, should lead us to some, call them medium-sized building blocks of a data governance framework of explaining, why governance doesn't mean something slow and ineffective and expensive. It actually means something that is building from the ground up in a way that's going to be useful and produce dollars in business value.
Yeah, absolutely. But and the reason it's come about, Chris, is that when we look at all of the things that are going on, I know we started talking about streaming, but as we start looking into the domain of augmented intelligence and advanced analytics, when we bring in inference on streaming data or we bring in inference on data, we don't necessarily, especially in healthcare and life sciences, have a well-governed, well-curated data set on which to build that. So the goal of this agile governance model is to go side by side with these high profile, high profit margin use cases around AI and advanced analytics, both with streaming and batch data, to help build up the foundation so that you can make advances and build transformation into the operations of the organization without having to do an all stop and build the entire platform and the entire foundation out in order to support your 1 or 2, AI or AA use cases. You can now do it simultaneously and start seeing the value of that advanced technology adoption faster than you could before.
So this is really interesting. I want to let me go a little further into one area of this. So when I first started working, and this is going 6 or 7 years back, when I first started heavily working on what at the time was called big data, there was a whole school of thought of the, I'd call the if you build it, they will come. So just get what you were calling before data for data's sake. What I think I just heard you say, and I want to play this back, is that doing this correctly in an agile governance mode is almost like enlightened schema on read, right? So It's not schema on read in the sense of, just dump everything and we'll figure out what we want to do with it later, but that you have sort of, a crayon drawing of the use cases you may want to do. You have some real life proof points that, again, back to this requirements management, you're neither assuming you can do everything a priori. nor are you assuming that if you just collect an infinite amount of data that you'll find something neat consequent to it. Is that a fair interpretation?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fair. And to your point, right, it allows that incremental success to be driven by incremental progress, right? And eventually you'll get to the point where you can go, I want to look at the entirety of our data and see if there's any unknowns lurking in there.
Right.
But that's not where you start. You start with the value. And the value is the problems that harass the organization day to day that you can put a finger on, but you need to build into. And you do that agilely, both in the governance perspective and in the product development perspective.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. This is really interesting, and I really like your thought process on this. Let me shift gears, because you mentioned something else that intrigued me. So when we started, you were kind of talking about you've got a lens for your customers for NetApp. So sort of a two-part question. Does NetApp run on NetApp? And then maybe the other part of this is what I said I love talking to people who are tech sector and non-tech sector. What do tech sector folks know that corporate IT folks should know, and vice versa? Like, if you could sort of walk a mile in the other person's shoes, what would each person see if they could look in that alternate universe mirror?
First of all, NetApp runs everything on NetApp, right? Everything that we put out, we run internally. Right. So we're a fantastic story of, drinking our own Kool-Aid, eating our own, eggs, whatever metaphor you want to put in there, we do it, and we do it right. And that extends from edge to core to cloud, right? We partner with all the hyperscalers, and we leverage our capabilities in the hyperscalers. We leverage our capabilities in our data centers. We leverage our capabilities on the edge so that we can, like I said earlier, get ahead of any issues that might be coming. But having straddled that fence that you described, as I'm looking at corporate IT, I wish that they would understand that, the things that the tech sector are putting out are only as good as the adoption and the marriage of value in corporate IT, right? When we go to a customer, we're not trying to sell a box or sell a capability, right? We're trying to work on a problem that has high value for the organization. And I think sometimes that translation is really lost. And vice versa, if we look at what corporate IT could tell the tech sector, it's look for the places of value, understand the industry that you're pushing into, know the personas and the problems that those personas have, and then work that way. And I think that's why my role at NetApp exists, and the team that I'm on exists, because we bring that subject matter expertise of the corporate IT around healthcare and life sciences back into the tech sector to help us better build product and build solution, and then marry that with the value generation that we can do within our customer set. So it's all about, communication and knowing one another and knowing the business of one another, especially when it comes to what the tech sector should know about corporate IT.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, and that absolutely makes sense. And it's I've had this observation a lot from a talent lens that a lot of the time your rock stars end up being cross-functional folks. So folks who have worked in programmers who went to the business people who got interested in technology. But I think this cross-pollination between the corporate sector and then the technology sector is a really, really interesting lens on that.
Yeah, there was an article out, I don't know, a handful of years ago now, about the value of business translators. And those are those people who understand enough of the tech side and understand enough of the business side that they can form that bridge, right? And it was very much taken under the guise of the adoption of artificial intelligence and advanced analytics. But I think that paradigm exists now for all of tech. That there has to be people who understand the implications for the business and understand the tech enough to make that bridge and join those two pieces together in a very meaningful, effective manner.